we are at the point in the class where I need a volunteer, because we're at a point in the class where what I'm going to do is, just like I interview somebody when I rent a house to them, I'm going to go through our rental contract, which you find, I think, on page 19 in your book. It says rental contract. And you'll see this is a typewritten form. It's 12-point type, 16, I'm sorry, okay, very good. It's a typewritten form. I could make this print a lot smaller and get it on one page, but if I made it a lot smaller and got it all on one page, you wouldn't be able to read it, would you? It looked like a government form. So it's okay when you file stuff with the government to reduce it down to that 6-point type they like to use. But if you're actually going to read it to somebody else, have it in a size where you can read it and they can read it, because it's not as intimidating, is it? I don't want the type size to intimidate somebody, but you'll notice if you'll flip through a couple pages here, the disagreement is 6 pages long, and I tell new tenants, just like I'll tell you, that it used to be 1 page long. But every time I made a mistake, I added a paragraph. And people will say, well, you made a lot of mistakes. And I said, it's absolutely true. That's how I learn. But I learned, because when I make a mistake, I write it down so I don't make the same mistake again. Yes, sir?
You have a typo on the first page.
Well, good. Where is it?
Tenants do not quality to be qualified.
Well, it's spelled right, though, isn't it? The nice thing about spell check is every word in this document is spelled correctly. It may not be the right word, but it is spelled correctly. Thank you. That's the dangerous part about spell check. So do I have a volunteer? Here's what I like. I like somebody who doesn't know me very well, who's never seen this agreement before, and who's not shy about asking questions. I don't want you to give me a hard time, but I want you to come up. We have 2 bar stools. I'll sit on one, you sit on the other one, and we'll just go through this. And if I go to a paragraph and you have questions about it, or don't like it, or don't understand it, I'm happy for you to challenge me. So is there a volunteer in the room? You don't have to give a speech or anything. Just say volunteer. Do I have a volunteer? Good. Please come up. This won't be scary. I'm not going to pick on you.
Oh, boy. You're not going to pick on him, but he'll pick on you.
Well, that's okay. I'm fair game. Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay. So when we sit in my office, we sit across the desk from each other. But, if you're working in somebody's house, it'd be good to have a table that you can sit at. You'll see at the bottom of each page, we're going to have the applicant, the tenant, initial it, and I'll initial it. And what's the reason for initialing each page? So you can prove that you went over that page and they read it. Okay, so if they're ever in front of the judge and they say, well, I don't remember that part, and they'll say, these are your initials, right? We went over that, and you want to go over it, don't you? Now, I don't read this agreement word for word, but I explain each paragraph, and I do talk about the things that are really important to me. So that's what we'll do during this time here. So you'll see here right at the top of the paragraph, it says office hours by appointment, and it gives my email address. We're not in the office all the time. So to make it easy for you to contact me, you have email, I assume, you have access to a computer. It's better for you to send me an email, because I can pick that up no matter where I am. If I'm out of town or something, I can pick that up, and we'll respond as fast as we can. We'll talk about emergencies a little bit later, but if it's just normal maintenance, let's say your hot water heater is not as hot as it used to be, we'll try to take care of that the next business day. If you have an emergency situation like a tree fell on your house, we're going to respond as fast as we can. We can't do miracles, but we'll respond as fast as we can. But it gives you a way to contact me. It's frustrating sometimes if you leave a phone message and you can't get through to somebody, but if you leave the email, then we will respond as quickly as we can. At the top here, we say in consideration of the agreements of the residents. I'm going to put your name in here, and if there's another adult living with you, we'll put both their names on the top line there. The owner rents them the dwelling located at, and I'll put the address of the house there, whatever the address is, commencing on a certain date. Now, what is the date? The 2nd of June, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're going to start this, I'll just put in June 2nd. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Good. Well, that's the first sale, isn't it? That's the first sale, because what if he doesn't want to move in until the 1st of July? If you didn't want to move until the 1st of July, you say, well, let's make it the 1st of July, and I say, okay. What does that cost me?
Whole month's rent.
Whole month's rent. So if he says 1st of July, what am I going to do? I'm going to negotiate a little bit here. I say, well, what if we split the difference and make it the 10th of June?
That sounds better.
Well, that's giving up something, isn't it? I mean, I didn't split it right down the middle. It's giving up something. But, we're talking about real money here. What's the difference between the 10th and the 15th of June?
Do I get a month free?
It's a lot of money, right? Several $100s. So I'm going to ask. No, you don't get a month free.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But that's the first point of negotiation that comes up is when they're going to. So try to make it today. Put today's date in there, because if you start collecting rent from today, that's making you money, isn't it? And then we're going to run it monthly thereafter until the last day of some month. So it doesn't have to be the last day of June 2013. We can make it the last day of June 2014. So if you'd like to stay for 2 years without a rent raise, I can do that right now. I can lock you in 2 years at the same rent. You'd like to do that?
I like that.
Well, I like that too, because I like his attitude already. I want somebody who wants to stay at least 2 years, because if somebody goes in with the idea of staying at least 2 years, they'll unpack more, won't they? They'll hang stuff on the walls. They'll get their kids in a scout troop. They'll join a church. They'll do things for 2 years that they may not do for 1 year. So it's very good psychologically to have somebody stay in there for 2 years. Okay? But the important point here is he's staying through the last day of a month, not the first day of the month. So if he's moving out on June 30th, 2013 or 2014, you need all your stuff out by June 30th. And I'll right now I'll tell her, say, Herb, sometimes people will move out on the 30th, but then they'll leave some of their stuff behind, or they'll have to come back and clean. And that doesn't work, because I've got somebody who'll be moving in on the 1st. So if you know you're moving out June 30th, it's best to plan to be out like a week ahead of time, so you can go in and clean, get all your stuff out. That way we can get your deposit back to you right away. When somebody moves in on the 1st, this is a smooth transition. And that's important to talk about, isn't it? Because if you don't talk about that and somebody hangs around for an extra week or two, that really messes your life up. So make sure you get that said. Okay, paragraph 1 talks about late fees here. And it says you're going to pay as rental the sum of. Now I've told you that the rent is $1,000 a month, but I'm going to put in here $1,100 a month, and I want you to skip right down to the second paragraph with me, where it says discount for paying rent on time and for maintaining the house. I'm going to read this to you. It says, as an incentive to the resident to be responsible for repairs and continuing maintenance of the house and yard each month, and to pay the rent payments on or before the 1st of the month, a discount in the amount of $100 may be deducted from the above rental sum each month. Tenants do not qualify for the discount if repairs are not made to the property when needed, or if the rent is not received when due. So here's what I'm saying to you. I need to rent this house to somebody who, number one, can pay the rent on time. Are you able to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
That's a good
Absolutely.
answer. Just like sitting in the emergency room, I want an affirmative action there. So yes, he can pay the rent on time. And I want you to understand this part about maintenance. I'm not asking you to do anything exciting. I don't want you doing wiring. I don't want you doing roofing. But if there's something little that you can do to the house, if you've got a doorknob that's loose that you can tighten up or even replace, if you get a stove burner that goes out that you can replace, you're responsible for like replacing the air conditioning, filters, light bulbs, little stuff like that. I mean, I don't have somebody on staff. Say again?
A ballast?
Ballast would be great if you know how to do it, yeah.
You reimburse the parts?
Well, you're responsible for the first $100 a month. So if it's something small, something you go down to Home Depot and buy for $10 and do yourself, it's best for you to do that. The whole idea here is I'm willing to rent you this house at a bargain rent. Now, you've looked at some other houses, and you've probably seen other houses that cost more than this one that aren't as nice as this one. So I'm making you a good deal here. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. To get that
I haven't
deal,
seen the house.
Yeah. Well, you've seen it by now. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But in order to keep the cost of operating this house to a reasonable rate, if you'll do little things, because if I send somebody over your house, it always costs me $100. I mean, I can't send anybody to your house who'll do anything for less than $100 anymore. If you can take care of little things that only cost $5 or $10, that saves us both some money, and it keeps me out of your house, keeps me from sending somebody to your house on a regular basis. So I want to respect your privacy. I want you to have the use of that house, but I'm going to ask you to do little things that you know how to do. Now, I don't want you changing light switches if you don't know how to do that. I don't want you doing something you don't know how to do. Don't experiment on the house. But if you know how to do something and you can fix it and keep our costs down, that's good for both of us. I can keep your rents low. And, I've had people live in houses as long as 10 years, and the rents will creep up a little bit with tax and insurance, but the rents still stay low. So that'll work for you, too, if you can do that. So do you understand that? Because I want to make sure you understand that I want you to do a little stuff, not dangerous stuff. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that now. But if you do those two things, then we put the $1,100 a month in paragraph 1. You get this $100 discount for doing these two things. So you're really getting this discount each month. You only have to pay me $1,000. So that's saving you a lot of money over a period of a year. Balance of paragraph 2 down at the bottom, it says, in the event the discount is lost 1 month while the resident 1 month, the resident can qualify for a discount subsequent months as long as you comply. So it's not something you would lose for the entire term of the agreement. If you lose the discount 1 month because you paid late, next month you pay on time, you get a discount back. Okay, so we want you to pay early. See, when you pay me early, then I can pay guys to do work for me early. And that's important because then I get good service from them. You know, you call me up with a problem and I can get it fixed maybe in a day or so because I'm willing to pay them on time.
John, did you advertise this house at $1,000?
I did. I advertised it at $1,000. The cheap number, the lower of the two numbers. So that's the number I want him to pay.
So putting in $1,100 is a bit of a surprise, though.
Yeah, but nobody ever reacts except people in class. I've never had a tenant. He didn't give me a hard time. Nobody
I
else
was
ever
getting
gives me a
ready
hard
to.
time. Well, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I'll tell you, it doesn't happen. You have to practice a little bit, but that doesn't happen. Okay, go back up to paragraph 1, and it said there's two things here. There is a late fee if you pay me late, and there is a bad check fee if you give me a bad check. Now, I hope you never give me a bad check, because that's really bad for both of us, because then your bank will charge you, my bank will charge me, and my check may bounce that I gave to somebody else. So that's the worst of all possible worlds. It's much better for you to say, look, I can't pay you until tomorrow than give me a bad check. So think about that, if you ever get in that situation. Now, let me just tell you what happens. If somebody does give me a bad check, and it happened last month, I call them immediately as soon as we know that check's bad. Okay? Now, sometimes what happens? Sometimes the tenant will call me and says, my check's going to bounce. How do they know? There's no money in the account. They knew when they wrote the check it was going to bounce, didn't they? But they gave it to me to kind of keep me quiet for a day or two, and then they called me up and said, my check's going to bounce. I always respond the same way. I said, look, you've never bounced a check on us before. Okay? If you'll bring the cash or a money order in right now, right now, I'll wait for it, not like tomorrow, but this afternoon, I'll forgive. I won't worry about you losing your discount, but you still have to pay me the $50 bad check fee. And they'll do that. They'll bring the cash down right now because they want to save that $100. And they cost them $50. And they'll go out and scramble up and get the cash wherever they have to get it. They'll go Amscot or someplace and get the cash and come down and pay us. But follow up immediately when somebody gives you a bad check. So if somebody's a day late on the rent, that happens all the time. That's no big deal. But I'm going to charge them $100 because if I don't charge them the $100 late fee when they're a day late, next week, or next month, they're going to be 2 days late. And then pretty soon they'll be 5 days late. They're going to work you. They're going to work you right up the list. So you have to have rules that you think are reasonable, and then enforce them. Okay, enforce them. If you don't think your rules are reasonable, change your rules. But if you have rules, don't have a rule and then ignore it. That's a really bad plan. Really bad plan.
John, you said $100 if they're late. Then you do that plus $25 a day?
Well, I have the opportunity to charge him both the lost discount, which would be $100, and charge him $25 late. If Irv calls me up and said, look, I'm 2 days late, why should I pay you now? I might as well pay you like 3 weeks from now. I said, well, Irv, you can pay me 3 weeks from now, but it's $25 a day from here forward. So make it easy on yourself. Okay? And if you don't pay me today, I'm going to start an eviction action. And if I start an eviction action and I incur some kind of fees because of that, and I will, they're coming out of your security deposit. Okay, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to push me here. So again, you can do this with a smile on your face. You can do this and be a nice person because you're not changing the rules on them. That's when it gets ugly, when you start changing the rules. But these are the same rules that you had when somebody moved in. You just want to be clear about them and you want to enforce them. Paragraph 3 talks about appliances. Now, I know you have your own refrigerator, which is a good thing because we don't have any refrigerators in our house. Now, if somebody doesn't have a refrigerator, make them go out and buy one. What's it cost to buy a refrigerator? You buy a brand new one for $1,000. What do you buy a nice used one for? $200. Yeah, you can buy a refrigerator that runs for a couple $100. Refrigerators are high maintenance, low maintenance. They're high maintenance. You don't want to own a bunch of refrigerators. If you own 30 houses, you own 30 refrigerators, right? That's a lot of equipment, and it's all high maintenance going down in value. It's a silly thing to do. So we don't own any refrigerators. If I buy a house with a refrigerator in it and I'm renting it to somebody, what I'll do is I'll sell it to them. I'll say, look, there's a refrigerator in that house. I'll sell it to you for $50 if you don't have one. Is that a pretty good price? Mm-hmm. I got it for free. I bought the house, right? It didn't cost me anything. I don't want to own the darn thing. I'm happy to give it to Goodwill or somebody if they'll come get it. I'm delighted to sell it to my tenant for $50, as is, because I'm never going to touch that refrigerator again. When it breaks, it's going to be his refrigerator, and when it breaks, it won't be a $10 charge, will it? It'll be a $100 charge. Now, if you're on topic, I'll take the question, but let's not get distracted. Yes, sir.
Since you're not including any appliances, are you discounting your rent from market rents a little bit?
I am. Yeah, the question is, am I discounting my rent a little bit from market rent because I don't include appliances? The answer is yes. You know, you probably can, people will say, well, I can rent a house with a refrigerator and a washer and dryer. I said, well, go ahead. You know, it'll cost you more money though, probably. I mean, mine's probably a little bit cheaper. And again, mine's probably a little bit nicer. And I just painted the garage so it looks good. Yes. Be on topic now.
Yeah, mine is on the appliances too. When you say air conditioner, do you mean window air conditioner or do you not provide central air?
Well, almost all. The question is, what about air conditioners? Air conditioners are appliances. What it says here is the discount applies to the appliances, if you read this paragraph. So if your air conditioner breaks and you call for service, you pay the first $100. I pay the rest. And this $100 discount, just so we're real clear, it's sort of like a deductible on an insurance policy. You can never be charged more than $100. I don't care if the roof falls in, you only pay $100, I pay the rest. So buy a new air conditioner for $2,000, you pay $100, I buy the rest. New hot water heater, $500, you pay $100, I pay the rest. Now you've seen the house, the air conditioner's in good shape, the hot water heater's in good shape, everything works, all the plumbing works. You can probably live in this house 2 years and have no maintenance problems at all. You know, unless you break something, I don't think anything's going to happen to this house in 2 years. If you live here 20 years, maybe something will happen. I mean, things will wear out occasionally. But houses typically require attention because somebody lives there and they break something. They stop something up or they break something. So if something just wears out, your downside risk is $100. Fair enough? And what he's saying is, do I want to rent this house with this deal, or do I want to rent somebody else's house where they'll take care of everything? Or here's the real world, they'll promise to take care of everything. And what happens is they don't take care of everything sometimes. They just ignore stuff. I'll actually take care of things. I'll keep this house operating, and I'll convince them of that. So let me move through this, and then at the end, I'll get some more questions for you, okay? So paragraph 3 talks about these appliances, and it says tenants are responsible for all repairs up to the amount of the discount. So anything above the discount would be mine. And you've got your own refrigerator, you've got your own washer and dryer. The rest of the stuff just doesn't break very often. Extra occupants in paragraph 4 here. It says to use the dwelling as living quarters for 2 adults and 3 children. And we've got your children listed there. And it says you agree to pay $250 a month for any other person who will occupy the property for more than 7 days. Now, if your parents come and stay with you, if your aunt comes and stay with you, a friend comes and stays with you, I don't care. But if you move 3 new people in the house, who are unrelated to you and they live there full time, I have the right to charge you more rent. And I don't want that to happen. You know, I wouldn't rent to you if I thought you were going to move 3 more people in the house because the house isn't big enough. You know, you'd wear the house out, and that's not good for you or the house. We good on that?
Okay.
Good, okay. Acceptance of property and agreement to notify owner of any defects. This paragraph says that you've looked at the property, you accept it in its current condition, and if you find something wrong with the property that neither one of us know of, you know, something you didn't see, that you'll notify me. And it's especially, you know, if you see something dangerous, you know, you turn everything on and you have maybe a leaking pipe or an electrical outlet that's not working, tell me right away. I want to fix that for you right away. I'm going to give you a 3-day inspection sheet, and within 3 days after you take occupancy, you're moved in, you got everything turned on, so you get a chance to use everything. If you find something mechanical that's not working with the house, I want you to let me know. You can email it back to me. You can drop it by the office, but I want you to let me know within those 3 days, and I'm going to have a guy come out right away and fix them, because I want you to have a good house to start with. And, you know, I've never lived in a house, so, you know, I'm not real, you know, I don't know if everything works. I think it does, but I'm not sure everything works. We good there?
Okay.
Okay, maintenance on paragraph 6. It says, you agree to maintain the house and the yard during the period of this agreement. And it isn't, you know, I use common sense here. I'm happy for you to hang pictures on the walls. I'm happy for you to do things to make the house comfortable for yourself. Things that bother me are kids putting stickers on walls or doors because they're really hard to get off. If you want to paint a room a different color, that's okay as long as you're willing to repaint it the color it is now when you move out. So, I mean, be very careful about painting some dark color because it's hard to cover up dark brown or purple or something like that. But, you know, the house has been freshly painted. It looks good right now. I hope you like it just the way it is and you'll take it the way it is. But this goes on to say if there's a damage to windows or screens, and, you know, anything that's damaged that you're responsible for maintaining it. It says you're specifically responsible for replacing and cleaning the air conditioning filters, which is a very big thing here in Florida because the air conditioner runs a lot. And if you don't change that filter about once a month, it'll get dirty. It gets dirty, it burns out the fan motor, and that's a big deal. So, you know, if you don't change the filter and the fan motor burns out, you're responsible for that entire repair. So you want to make sure you change that filter. The last line in paragraph 6, it says, you agree to provide pest control in the event it's needed. Now, if you ever see any bugs eating the house, if you'll call me, I'll kill those bugs. But if you don't have cockroaches or crickets or things that just kind of come in with the kids, those are yours. You know, it's your responsibility to keep those down.
Love bugs.
Paragraph 7 talks about water damage. Now, this is an important paragraph because people have discovered mold recently. And, mold and mildew are caused by water. And that's what this paragraph says. It says water intrusion, water leaks, and improper ventilation of areas where water is used, like baths and laundry rooms, are primary causes of mildew and mold growth. And it's your responsibility to ensure any leaks are immediately repaired or reported in writing to me. So it's important, if you see something growing that you think is mold, first of all, make sure you don't have a leak, make sure you're not throwing wet towels against it, make sure you're not causing that thing yourself. In a closet, if you have way too many clothes and there's no ventilation, you'll find that mildew will accumulate on those clothes. So you need ventilation there or not so many clothes. That's a common issue. But anytime you see any water, if you think there's a water pipe leaking or something, it's your affirmative duty to call me and tell me about that, and because we want to take care of it. We don't want water in your house. That's a big problem. 8 talks about vehicles. It says you agree not to park or store a motorhome, recreational vehicle, or trailer of any type on the property, and to park only so many automobiles. How many automobiles do you have?
One.
One. Well, good.
And
We'll
a
put
motorcycle.
One motorcycle is no problem. You probably want to put that in the garage. And we'll list those on here. And it just goes on to say that you agree not to park on unpaved areas, like on the grass. And it says if you do park on an unpaved area, or if you have a car without a current registration, that it can be towed and stored at your expense by direct towing or any other towing service of my selection. So if you come home and you've parked on the grass just by accident one time and your car's gone, give me a call. I'll be able to tell you where your car is. And go pick it up. Thanks. Yeah. 9 talks about cleaning. Says you agree to accept the premises in its current state of cleanliness and give it back in the same condition. So, we just want it clean enough that the next person can move in. Everybody cleans, their own standards, but we want it clean enough that the next person can move in. So just give it back the way it is now and you're good. Security deposit. We've talked about this, but the security deposit on this house is $1,800 a month, $1,800. And that $1,800 is not the last month's rent. You're paying $1,000 rent. The security deposit is $1,800. And it says here to secure the residence place to full compliance with the terms of this agreement. And the deposit may not be used by the tenant to pay rent during the tenancy. So during the time you're in this house, you'll be paying me each month. And I don't care if you stay 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. So, the last month you're in there, you'll pay that month's rent. And when you move out, I'm going to give you the security deposit back. And we give 90% of our security deposits back, 100 cents on the dollar. We give them almost all back. And that's because people take care of the houses, they keep up with the maintenance, and they give us a house back in good shape. So, I hope that works out just like that for you. But the important point is, whatever your last month comes up, you can't use this deposit to pay that rent. And sometimes people are confused about that, so I want to make sure you understand that part. Okay. You got it? Good. Pets. Do you have any pets?
I do.
What kind of pets do you have?
I have a golden.
A golden, okay.
Retriever.
We'll put
dog.
That's a good dog. It's one of my favorites.
He
We
watches.
put the golden retriever's name on here. We put the golden retriever. How much did it weigh?
66 pounds.
66 pounds. We put
Yep.
the gender on there, whether it's neuter, whether it has rabies shots. Okay, we put all that down there. And that's the only pet you have, right? Mm-hmm. Good. Well, is there a problem having a pet in the house? Not for me. None of it's a good pet. Now, if you say up here at the top, it says there's a non-refundable pet fee of $50 per month per pet. And I told you about that before, so you're not.
No, you didn't tell me about that.
Well, it's a standard. It says so right here on the, I can't change it or I would, but it says it right here.
I can mark it out. My dog's really good.
Well, we can't do that. If I change any word in this agreement, I would be discriminating. There's federal laws against that. I can't do that. All pets, one line here I need to read to you just so you understand that it's important that you tell me about the pets. It says here, all pets found on the property but not registered under this agreement will be presumed to be strays and disposed of by the appropriate agencies prescribed by law. It's really important that we list all the pets on here, because if the people come over and there's more than one pet, we may grab the wrong one. That'd be a mistake. So, are you sure you just have the one dog?
On occasion, I have a friend that drops one
You have a
off for the
friend
weekend.
that drops a dog off for the weekend. Now, has that ever happened before? Now, how long is that dog going to stay?
Usually just for the weekend.
That's for the weekend. Well, let's put that one on there too, because it's only $50 a month, and
I don't think so.
Yeah. You know, how many times have you found a tenant who had no pets, but somebody just dropped one off for the weekend, they were taking care of it? Yeah. Yeah. Keep an eye out for that one. That's a real deal. Yes, sir. On topic.
What if the person, instead of having dogs and cats, have reptiles?
Well, we list them on here and we charge for them. Yeah. Rabbits, too. Rabbits are good. The only thing we exclude are tropical fish. Okay? And so if subtropical, we charge for those. Down at the bottom here, it says, in the event a resident harbors an undisclosed pet, they agree to pay a pet fee for the entire term of the agreement, regardless of when the pet was first introduced to the household. So if you sneak a dog in on me, and I catch you right at the end, you've been there 2 years, I'm going to charge you $50 a month for 2 years. That's a lot of money, isn't it? That's a lot of money. So I'm serious about this. I don't mind renting to people with pets, but I want to know what the pets are. I want you to pay something for them. And will people pay $50 a month for a pet? Sure. Yes, they will. They won't pay for their kids, but they'll pay for the pets, okay? They pay for the kids in a whole different way. Okay, so this goes on, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, although I would read the whole thing if we had a pet owner in there. But it says they're responsible for property damage to our house, to neighbors' houses, for pet waste, for making sure the dog doesn't bark and bother the neighbors, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Paragraph 12, we list the residence obligations under Florida Statute 8352, which is our tenant and landlord law. And it says you agree to meet the residence obligations as follows. You take affirmative action to ensure nothing that puts me in violation of any laws. Okay, and that's common sense stuff. Including you will not participate in any illegal activity while on the premises. That sounds a lot like drugs, right? That's the illegal activity I've got in mind. So, you don't want people running businesses unless you know about them, probably. B talks about keeping it clean, removing garbage and trash, right? We talked about that earlier. Maintaining plumbing in good working order, preventing stoppages and leaks of plumbing. And we'll talk one more time about plumbing, but plumbing, we don't take the responsibility if you stop up the plumbing. If something happens where you stop something down the sink and the disposal gets plugged up, you caused that, so you're responsible for fixing it. Same thing if you get a lot of hair in your shower drain or you plug up the toilet. I'm sorry, but that's your responsibility. That's nothing the house did wrong. That's just the way you used it. So be careful. And those little white things people use now, the sanitary wipes, they wipe off the toilet seat, then they flush them. They plug it up about half the time. Don't ever do that. If you ever wipe stuff down, put it in the trash can. Don't put stuff in the toilet except toilet paper. You'll be safer. C says you operate everything in a safe and sanitary manner. D says you'll assure the property belonging to the owner is safeguarded against damage, destruction, loss, removal, or theft, which means you keep the house locked up and the windows closed and that type of thing. And E says you'll conduct your family and friends and guests in a manner not to disturb others. So if you have a big party, invite the neighbors, Residents warrant that you'll meet the above conditions. Acknowledge that failure to do so will be grounds for termination of this agreement and loss of all deposits without further recourse. So, if you're running a business or something and we get in trouble because of it, I'm sorry, but that'll be the end of our tenancy. I'm going to give you a short notice. You'll have to move out. At the bottom here, I'd like an emergency contact. And as I said before, the emergency I'm concerned about is he can't pay the rent. So I'm looking preferably for a parent, so I'm going to do my best to get your parent's name, address, phone number there. 13 talks about subletting. It says no subletting is allowed. Residents agree not to assign or sublet any part of the property or nor allow any other person to live there without owner-specific written permission. So, I'm renting you this house for your family, but not for other people. And if for some reason you had to leave early and move out, I'd want to meet whoever moves in behind you. Now, if you can find a new tenant, if you have somebody who wants to rent a house, I'm delighted to meet with them. And we'll go over the agreement just like I'm going over with you. And I'm easy to deal with, so it won't be a problem. But I'd want to know who was living in that house. We'd want an application, and we want to go over this agreement with them. Okay? So if you moved out early, you couldn't just sublet somebody else without me meeting them. 14 talks about court costs and attorney's fees, and it says the resident agrees to pay all court costs and attorney's fees incurred by the owner enforcing this legal action. In the event any portion of this agreement shall be found unsupportable under the law, the remaining provisions will continue to be valid and subject to enforcement in the courts without exceptions. And covenants in this agreement, once breached, cannot be afterward performed, or eviction proceedings may commence at once without notice. So if you break a rule and I let you get away with it and you break it again, I don't have to give you notice. And I'll tell you, this rarely happens, but if something if something's going on in the house, it's illegal, and I have to terminate you, I don't have to give you notice, and that's what this is saying. 15 talks about owner statements and right. It says no promise has been made by the owner or my agent that I haven't written down. So I haven't made you any oral promises, and we're giving the house an as-is condition. And 16 talks about partial payments. It says I can give you I can accept partial payments of rent, but here's the way it works. You'll lose your discount if you make me a partial payment. So we've set this whole thing up to give you a discount, to give you a good deal on the rent, as long as you pay me once a month. So we need $1,000 once a month on or before the first of the month. Now, a lot of people pay it early. They'll pay it on the 25th of the month, and that's fine. If you bring the money in early, or if you mail it in early, we will hold your check and deposit it on the first. But it's a good strategy to do it early. Yes, sir.
Now, I know you voted eviction. If you're in eviction and they put money in the account, does that mean you have to re-serve them and all that?
You do. If you're evicting somebody and they give you a partial payment of rent, you have to start the eviction over again. Yeah. So don't do it. Don't do it. Make a decision one way or the other. And if you're ever going to take a partial payment, let's say Irv owes me $1,000, and it's the third of the month, and he brings me in $800. Well, I'm going to take $800 in the third of the month. But it's the third of the month, and he brings me in $100. I'm not going to take $100 because he's not getting ahead. He needs to get ahead on me. So I've got to look at the math. And if somebody can catch up, they're only going to be a week or so behind and catch up. That's fine. But don't let people get further and further behind by making small partial payments. 17 talks about abandonment. It says if the resident leaves the residence unoccupied for 15 days while rent is due and unpaid, the owner is granted the right hereunder to take immediate possession and exclude the resident therefrom, removing at residence expense your property. And so by signing this agreement, and this in bold print is required by law, you agree that upon surrender or abandonment is defined by Florida statutes, I shall not be responsible for storage or disposition of your tenant's personal property. So here's what we're saying. If you move out, take your stuff with you. If you leave stuff behind and have not paid the rent and you're gone for 15 days, I'm not going to store your stuff. We're just going to set it out by the street and it'll be gone pretty quick, but it won't be protected. So it's important that now if you pay the rent, you can be gone for 2 months. I don't care. But this is if you haven't paid the rent, you just disappear, you leave a bunch of stuff behind. We're not going to store it for you. 18 says the people who signs this agreement will be responsible for everybody who lives there, so you can sign for everybody. 19 says you'll be responsible for all the utilities. Okay? And we have our tenants pay all the utility bills. We don't pay any. 20 talks about insurance. It says the owner's insurance does not cover residents' personal property. So this paragraph says this. It says if you have personal property that's damaged or stolen, my insurance does not cover that. So I encourage you to get your own insurance policy. I'm not going to require you to do it, but if you don't do it and you have a loss, you can't look to me for coverage. Okay? You clear on that? Mm-hmm. 21 says you agree not to remove or alter the owner's property without my permission. So that means if you wanted to do something inside a house, if you wanted to paint a room a different color, if you want to take blinds down, if you want to do something like that, we need to agree on it and we need to write it down to protect both of us. Okay, so I prefer you don't change anything in the house. I think the house works really well just the way it is. But if there's something you want to do, let's talk about it. If it makes sense, we'll write it down and we'll agree on it. 22 talks about water beds. Do you have a water bed?
No.
Good. We'll skip that. 23 talks about termination. Now, this is an important paragraph. It says after 1 month's rental payment is received, this agreement may be terminated by mutual consent, and you can terminate any agreement by mutual consent, right? That makes sense. Or by either party given written notice of at least 15 days prior to the end of any monthly period. That makes this a month-to-month agreement. Okay? It gives me as the landlord the right to change anything in this agreement with 15 days notice. Now, if we have hyperinflation, what might I change? The rent. Okay? I'm not real concerned about hyperinflation, but it could happen, and I want the right not to have to wait a whole year to raise my rent if it did happen. But I can change anything with 15 days notice. On the other hand, you can terminate. He can terminate anytime he wants. But this paragraph goes on to say this. It says, all parties agree that the termination of this agreement by the resident, that's you, prior to, and we're going to put the last day of this agreement down here, which would be June 30th, 2013, regardless of cause will constitute a breach of the tenancy as agreed on page 1, and all deposits shall be forfeited in favor of the owner as full liquidated damages at the owner's option. So what this says is if you move out in less than a year, you could lose your deposit. Now, if you give me notice that you're moving out, if we can re-rent a house, we find somebody else, a qualified tenant, and move back in, and we don't lose much rent, I'm happy to give your deposit back. I'm just trying to keep the house full. But if you move out in 4 months and the house sits empty for a month or two, you're probably going to lose your deposit because you're agreeing to stay for 1 full year. Does that make sense?
But you can raise the rent on me anytime you want.
I can.
Okay.
But I wouldn't do that because if you're a good tenant and everything's working. I mean, unless something really strange happens in the universe, let me tell you this. In all the time I've been doing this, I've never used this paragraph to raise rents more than once a year.
Because you told me I could have 2-year agreement with no rent raise.
Well, and I did, and I will live by that. I'll be
Okay.
happy to agree to that.
Okay.
Except for paragraph 23. 24 talks about method of payment. It says the initial payment of rent and deposits under this agreement must be made in cash or cashier's check drawn on a local financial institution. You don't want to take an out-of-state cashier's check, do you? Probably bogus. So make sure you don't take an out-of-town check. Cash is good. If you don't like taking cash, get a money order. Get something that's the equivalent of cash. Never take a personal check or a corporate check or some other check that you don't know is any good as a deposit in first month's rent unless somebody moves into a house. Because if they move in and the check's no good, you get to evict. And that's going to take a while. And that's how you get stuck as an amateur landlord. If somebody gives you a bad check going in and takes you 2 or 3 months to get rid of them, and they'll tear it up on the way out. It's just a disaster. Next page, delivery of rents and notices to landlord. It says rents and notices may be mailed by the U.S. mail to Florida Coast Realty at our address there. So you can mail the rent in if you like. You can put it in our mail slot, because that's why we have the mail slot there. Or if we set up some kind of electronic funds transfer where it's automatically credited to our account each month, we'll set that up for you. But those are 3 ways to get us rent. Now, you don't see my name as owner on there, but what does it say in that paragraph?
Florida Coast.
It says notices may be mailed through the U.S. mail to. And why is that language important? Because it's required by law. The law requires you to give a tenant notice of where they can send notices, okay? And I put the corporation name in there. It doesn't say the corporation owns it, but it says the corporation will accept notices for the owner. That's what that paragraph says. Now, you can ask what the penalty is for not doing that. The problem is this. You get in front of a judge, and the judge knows the law, and they see that you're not complying with the law in your rental contract, put you in a weak position, and it's probably going to go against you. So you want to be as compliant as possible. You know, if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but you don't make a mistake on purpose. Only rents received by mail or in person on or before the due date qualify the tenant for a discount. So here's why it's important. If you're going to use the mail, you want to mail it a couple days early. If you mail it the day before it's due, a lot of times it doesn't show up the next day. So we encourage people, if you're going to send it through the mail, and most of our tenants send it through the mail, send us a check, date it the 1st, and just mail it on the 25th. That'll give us 3 or 4 days to get there, and we'll have it plenty of time. 26 talks about getting your deposit back. It says security deposits will be deposited for the resident's benefit in a non-interest bearing account at PNC Bank, and you get your deposits back subject to provisions of Florida statute and as follows. And is an important word in that sentence, if you get my gist of it. The full term of the agreement's been completed, so you have to stay a year. Formal written notice of vacation has been given. So you've got to give me a letter that tells me what day you're moving out of the house. And that's important to me because many times I'll have somebody moving in right behind you. And if you call me up on the phone, say I'll be out July 1st, but then you don't move out, I've got a problem. So I need you to write me a letter and tell me when you're going to move out and make sure it's the right date. If you want to stay an extra 6 months, I don't have a problem with that. I just need to know when you're going to move out. After that first year, you can stay as long as you like. No damage or deterioration to the premises, building, or grounds is evident. The entire dwelling, appliances, closets, cupboards are clean, left free of insects, refrigerators defrosted. Not a problem if it's yours. Debris and rubbish have been removed from the property, and the carpets are cleaned and left odorless. I ask you to clean the carpets on the way out. As you'll notice when you move in, the carpets are nice and clean. We always clean them before you move in, and you clean them when you move out. Who actually cleans them before he moves in? Previous tenant cleans them before he moves in. Any unpaid charges, pet charges, late charges, extra visitor charges, delinquent rents, utility charges have been paid in full. Keys and garage door openers have been returned, including keys to any new locks installed, and a forwarding address has been left by the owner, with the owner. 15 days after termination of the occupancy, the owner will send a balance of deposit to the address provided by the resident, payable to the people who signed this agreement, or the owner will have 30 days to impose a claim on the deposit and so notify the resident by certified letter. And that's what our law requires. So know what your law requires. If you're not in a different state, make sure you understand the notice period on return of deposits and comply with it. But we can either give you the money back or make a claim on it. We try to move as fast as we can. There's no reason to drag this out. You're not making much money on this deposit. So give that deposit back as quickly as you can, because you want the house back in rentable condition as quickly as you can. If I know Irv is moving out next Tuesday, I'm going to have my guys lined up to get over there next Tuesday or Wednesday to do whatever work needs to be done, and the following day that house will be rentable. So we're going to turn it around in one day as much as we can. Yes, sir.
John, I thought it had to change from 15 to 30 days.
Well, if you read the law, which is in the back of your book, it says you can either give them their money back in 15 days or make a claim against it, and you have 30 days to make the claim. Okay, that's exactly, that's copied directly from the statute. 27, owners and agents' access to the property. Says the owner might be represented by an agent who will carry identification, and resident specifically agrees to permit the owner or agent access to the premises for purposes of inspection, repairs, to show the property to another person at reasonable hours on request. I'm not going to drop by and see you. You know, if you take care of the house, you pay the rent on time, you don't call me, you can probably go a whole year and not see me again if you like. But if you need something done, I want a way to make an appointment with you to send a guy out and fix things. And it'll be somebody that I send out. It'll be a plumber, an electrician, somebody like that. We'll have identification. So we won't just drop in. So if somebody comes and knocks on your door, it's not me. You know, it's not from our office. And unless you haven't paid the rent, of course. Then I'll come see you. You know, so if you want to see me, don't pay the rent. I'll be right over. Resident to provide owner phone numbers. We ask them to provide, and we get cell phone numbers. Nobody's got a house phone anymore. 3-day inspection says, under the terms of this agreement, you'll be provided with an inspection sheet, and it's your obligation to inspect the premises and fill out and return to the owner the inspection sheet within 3 days of taking possession. It'll be presumed that the house is functioning in a satisfactory manner in all respects after the expiration of 3 days, and if you fail to give us the statement back, this proof that there were no defects. So it's to your advantage. If there's anything wrong with the house, fill this out and get it back to me. If you don't, we're just going to assume the house is in good shape, and we won't send anybody out. But especially if you have something that's not working, I want to hear about it. You know, if the plumbing's not working, electrical's not working, now's the time to get everything tip-top shape, because then you're responsible for it after that. Paragraph 30 talks about repairs, and it says, in the event that repairs are needed that are beyond the competence of the resident, he or she is urged to arrange for professional assistance. In no case will the owner pay for cost to unplug toilets or sinks or shower or tub drains due to foreign matters or waste. And we've already covered that, but I want to make sure you understand that if you stop up a drain, it's your responsibility to get it unstopped. Good? Okay. Residents are offered a discount as an incentive to make their own decisions on the property. Therefore, the resident should contact the owner only for repairs costing more than the discount and for emergencies. As such, involvement by the owner will result in the loss of the discount that month. So if you do call me and I send somebody out to fix something, that's fine. I don't mind doing that, but you're going to pay the first $100. So if it's a $50 repair, it costs you money. It's something you could have fixed yourself cheaper. So we're trying to give you the incentive and the opportunity to save some money on this little stuff. Any repair that costs more than the amount of the discount must be approved by the owner, or the tenant will be responsible for the entire cost of that repair. So what that means is if you just call somebody to fix something without my approval, and let's say the bill is $300, without my approval, you know, you're not authorized to spend my money. You can spend your $300, but you're not authorized to spend my money. Now, as an aside, not to Irv, you know, if Irv can't get a hold of me and he calls a guy and he gets his garage door, it's not working, and he gets it working for $150 and the guy does a nice job, I'm not going to bust his chops on that. I'm going to pay the $50. I'll let him pay the $100, but I'll pay the $50 because he took care of it on his own. Part of what I like doing is getting the tenant involved in doing the repair work. I mean, not manually, but supervising it. Because if he can supervise the garage door spring getting repaired, if he can supervise a tree in the backyard getting cut down, if he can be involved in some of this stuff, it'll save me some money, but what else does it save me? It saves me a lot of time, doesn't it? So I want him involved. I want him thinking of this as his house, and people will take that responsibility. I mean, they'll get engaged, and I'll tell you more stories as we go on.
I can take that off the rent?
You can take the $50 off the rent. If it's a $150 bill, you're responsible for the first $100, but the other 50 you can take off the rent. So but we talk about it, because you're not authorized to spend that money unless we talk about it.
John, the first sentence, when you're talking about them losing a discount in the event of an emergency, isn't that kind of, if it's an emergency, let's say the roof's leaking, what you're saying in that sentence, that they're gonna lose their discount?
Well, they lose the first $100. I mean, they would lose $100 if a tree falls on the roof and I have to cut the tree down and repair the roof. It costs me $6,000. It'll cost Irv $100. He can have either side of that bill he wants, but if he gets to pay $100, I get to pay $5,900. That seems fair, doesn't it?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think.
Well, that's the deal. You don't have to rent here. I don't think I'd rent to you anyway.
But the air conditioner goes, you're gonna charge me $100 for the air conditioner?
I am. The air conditioner goes out, you get paid the first $100, I'll pay the rest. If you don't like it, you don't have to live here. I got two guys right behind you that want the house. I don't like your attitude.
Just have it all happen the same month, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happened. Irv said, we'll just have 2 or 3 repairs happen the same month. Tenants who are clever catch on to that, don't they? Yeah. They have 2 or 3 things break the same month, and that's okay. You know, I understand. I do the same thing with them. But they still pay the first $100, and I pay the rest. And I'll try to get one guy out there and fix all 3 at the same time, hopefully, and it won't cost me too much. But, you know, you do look for attitude. And if somebody tries to negotiate and give me a hard time before they move in the house, you know, I'll just look at you and say, I don't think this is going to work out. And then I don't say anything until you leave. And if you don't say anything for a while, I stand up and say, see you later. You know, because I'm not going to rent somebody a house that's going to give me a hard time before they move into the house or negotiate with me. You know, I want somebody who wants this house. You know, I want somebody buying this house from me, not literally buying, but who wants this house, not somebody I'm trying to sell this house to. You see the difference in attitude? I want them to want it more than I want to get rid of it. So that's something I'm looking for. Workers' warranty on page paragraph 31 here. The balance page number 30 just said that, you know, if you make improvements, that they become mine. Workers' warranty says if you do work or you hire somebody to do work, you're saying to me that it'll be done in a workmanship-like manner according to code, and they'll be responsible for any liability. So we don't want you doing things you don't know how to do. As I said earlier, if you're not an electrician, don't do any electrical work. If you're not a plumber, don't do any plumbing work. You know, if you're not a painter, don't paint. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, don't experiment on my house. It doesn't help either one of us. So just call me. Lead paint, if the house is built before 78, it might have lead-based paint, and this is the paragraph that covers that, and you have to give them a flyer, and we give them a flyer. 33 is radon, again, prescribed by our state law. It says we have to tell them there's radon, and they can get more information. 34 talks about smoke detectors. They have changed the Florida statute to say that you're required now to supply smoke detectors. And it said we have installed smoke detectors in this residence, and it's your responsibility to maintain them and test them periodically and replace the batteries. In the event the detector is missing or inoperative, the tenant has an affirmative duty to notify the landlord immediately, and I'll put a new one in, no charge on that. But let me know if it needs new smoke detectors, or if you can't find them and somebody stole them, let me know that. Okay? Because we want the house to have smoke detectors. The last paragraph here just says that we've read this, we understand it. If you have any other questions, I certainly don't want to rush you through this. I want you to understand everything here. What this is just kind of, I like to talk about as many things that can happen before you move in as I can. So if you have any other questions, ask them. And at the bottom of each of these pages, what I'm going to ask you to do is I have your initial at the bottom of each page, and we'll both sign the last one, and then I'll make a copy of it for you. Now, if you don't have a copy machine, just do 2 copies to start with. And get everybody to sign 2 copies, fill it out, initial to the bottom, give them one, you take one. Now, don't give a tenant a copy of a signed agreement until you have their money. Because if you give them a copy of a signed agreement and they accidentally kept a key somehow and they move into the house and they call the cops and say, hey, somebody broke in my house, and cops go out and they say, well, I got a rental contract, cops aren't going to kick them out. Cops are confused at this point. You're stuck and you're going to have to evict them. So everybody clear on that? Don't give them a copy of a signed rental contract unless they give you all the money. Make sure it's a real deal. Questions? Yes, sir.
Would you have this notarized?
No, I won't have it. Let's just give Irv a big round of applause here. He did a nice job. Thank you for your help. You can stay if you want to, or you can leave. Okay. I know how you feel. Oh yeah, I did get the cash. Yes, ma'am.
After the initial contract period, do you do another lease, or do you just go month to month?
Well, you'll see here in a second. To start with, this is a month-to-month agreement. This is always has been a month-to-month agreement, always will be. It's never caused me any trouble. If you think about how the real world works, if I sign a 5-year lease with Irv and I have my crackerjack lawyer draw it up and it's 36 pages long and it's notarized and we record it and he leaves town next week because he loses his job and goes to Timbuktu, is that lease worth anything? No. Not really. Not really. I'm not going to pursue a residential tenant on a 5-year lease trying to collect a rent. So giving somebody signing up a 5-year lease with a residential tenant, it's not really worth much. Now, if it's a big company, like Sears Roebuck or who else has gone out of business recently? Some big company signs a lease, then you think it's worth something, right? But maybe it's not. With residential tenants, the lease favors the tenant. It doesn't favor the landlord. From a landlord's perspective, you always want the shortest term deal that you can so you can change things, but you want to try to select a tenant who's got long-term potential, who will stay 4 or 5 years. Because if you can get somebody to stay 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're making money on those people. Somebody leaves in 2 years or less, they probably cost you money. So it's your job to find somebody that will stay at least 2 years. Yes, ma'am.
Back on paragraph 1 about your late fees, I had a lawyer tell me that I should add the words, all fees add on to as rent,
Okay.
so that I can claim that if I do a 3-day notice.
Okay. When I do a 3-day notice and when I evict people, what am I really trying to do? Get rid of them typically, right? I mean, it will say the money's important, and you want to ask for the right money to make sure the judge doesn't throw the deal out because you're asking for the wrong money. But as a practical matter, you hardly ever get the money. You generally get possession. But good point, though. Yes, sir.
The checks are for the Close Realty, Sarasota Inc., for the owner, but nowhere who the owner is.
Doesn't say who the owner is, and the law doesn't require you to tell them who the owner is. The law requires you to give a place for notice, someplace they can send notice, and that's what this does.
Where do you tell them how to make the check out and who to make it out to?
I write that down for them on a separate piece of paper. I say, make your checks out to, because I've got 2 or 3 different places you can make checks out to. Could be my pension plan, could be me personally, could be to the corporation. I have more than one owner that's involved here, so I write that down on a separate piece of paper. I didn't put that in here, but when I give them a receipt. When people give you money, you want to give them something in writing, don't you? For your records in their records. So write down on a piece of paper or type it out on your word processor and hand it to them. Check should be made payable to John Schaub, okay, or John Schaub Trustee, or Florida Coast Realty, or ProServe Pension Plan. I mean, a lot of different places that check could be payable to. And it's different with a lot of different tenants. It's not all the same. Go ahead.
Do you do annual or biannual maintenance inspection to make sure the tenants are indeed making repairs so they don't get to be a real big problem?
Yeah, John's question is how often do we get into the property? And I don't have a regular schedule for getting into the property, but as a practical matter, people generally we generally get into that property ever so often. And I use the same people to do almost all my work. So if it's a plumber, I call them up and say to the plumber, check out a house. Tell me, here's what I'm curious about. How many people live in there, or how many dogs you see, that kind of stuff, and get answers from them. I rarely go in the house myself unless somebody's not paying rent. And if somebody's not paying the rent, I'll try to get in the house. Somebody opens the door, I'm going to walk in. My house, right? And I won't get in a fight about it, but I'm going to do my best to at least get my nose in that door and see what's going on, see what kind of house, what it will look like. Most of the time, you're pleasantly surprised. Most of the time, it's good news. Occasionally there's trouble, but if somebody's a bad housekeeper and they move into your house and they don't do dishes very often, they don't do laundry very often, and the housekeeping standards aren't yours, and you go look at that house and say, well, I wish I hadn't rented to them, are you going to evict them? Probably not. If they're paying, they're just not good housekeepers. They might stay there 20 years and not be good housekeepers. So you have to be careful about what you're looking for when you go into a house, but the number of people, the number of animals, are they doing maintenance? I mean, common sense stuff would be nice. I send them a 3-day notice. Question is, if the rent comes in 1 day late, I send them a 3-day notice for that $100. I light them up, see what happens. Okay, have a conversation. And I may forgive it down the road, but I want them to know that I know. Okay, I want them to know that I noticed that check came in late. Or I might just call them up and say, look, your check's not here, so you need to bring it in. I say, well, we mailed it. I said, and sometimes the wife says, didn't you mail that check? You hear that in the background. That happens more than once. And so sometimes it's just an internal, internal controls are off a little bit, and they need to straighten that out. But we're tough on that because if you have these rules and you don't enforce them, things are going to go wrong. So you have to decide whether or not you want these rules. You've got to decide what kind of rules you want to enforce. Now, if you want to give somebody 3 days to pay the rent, make the discount for 3 days, do that. If that makes you happier. But don't let them have 4 days now. You've got to draw a line in the sand someplace, don't you? Whether it's 1 day, 4 days, 10 days, pick a number you like, but you have to draw a line in the sand. And when they cross over that line, just like the bank, you bounce a check or you pay your payment a day late at the bank and you call the bank up and say, I was only 1 day late, can't you forgive that late fee? It's going to be hard, isn't it? It's going to be hard. Take a lot of work to get that late fee forgiven. So you have to think like the bank. You have to be pleasant. You have to be very honest and open going in to make sure they understand it. But once they agree, once Irv says, okay, then we've got our deal. Okay, let's look at the rent-up checklist here on the next page. And I probably won't read this whole thing to you, but to go through it kind of quickly. When you go to rent a house up, first thing you want to do is make sure it's in good shape. Fix things that are wrong with the house before you rent it. Spend $500 on the house before you rent it, rather than let it sit empty for 2 months and have it sit there because people won't rent it from you because it smells bad or it's ugly or whatever. Spend a little money. You should have it in your budget. If you're too tight to spend money to fix the house up before you rent it, you're going to get a tenant who's going to pay you less money each month. So you're going to lose $50 a month instead of spending $500. That's a bad plan, isn't it? You're better off spending the $500. You come out ahead. Put a sign on the property. Put a flyer in a window. Tell them what the numbers are. Put an ad on the internet. Put pictures on the internet. Go out with your phone. Take a bunch of pictures of the house. People like to see pictures. Notify neighbors of the vacancy, especially the people across the street. Tell them the rental amount in case they have friends that are interested in renting. Arrange for lawn care. Keep the house looking sharp. And if the lawn looks nasty, I don't do a lot to my lawns while people live in the houses. I don't do a lot of landscaping. My lawns are pretty basic. But when somebody does move out, I'll look at it. And that's when I'm likely to spend $100 putting a couple bushes in, doing something to dress up the front of the house just to spiff it up a little bit. So that's the time to spend a little bit of money on the yard. Make sure the phone listed and rental ad is answered. This is my biggest beef with realtors. You can call 5 realtors. You're lucky if you get one of them on the phone. Okay? Hard to do. If I've got a house for sale, the number I put in any kind of ad is whose number? My cell phone number. I want to talk to everybody who calls. Okay? And I'm interested in talking to you. Same thing with a rental ad. If I've got a number listed, I want to answer the phone and talk to the people because that's how you do business. People are hesitant to leave numbers, especially in the rental business. People are looking and they want something pretty soon. It's not like they're looking for a house to buy where they'll hang around for 6 months. They want something this week. So if you'll respond quickly, it terrifically increases your chances of doing business with these people. Make extra keys to get prospective tenants if you're going to give them out. As I pointed out before, you might want to change that front door lock if you're going to give somebody like a repairman or a neighbor a key and then change it back. Take key ID, get ID form, get a form signed before you get out a key. Have interested people fill out the application before you interview them. And the reason for that is you don't want to spend a half an hour talking to people unless they're serious about this house. And if they won't fill out the application and give you $100, they're not serious about this house. You want to make sure they're serious. You want to qualify these people. Interview the tenant, review the application, use the rental agreement, either accept them and sign the agreement and secure the deposit, the security deposit, or take a phone number and let them know after you check your references. So if you hadn't had a chance to check your references yet, sometimes people make the application, they need to rent a house right now, and you can say, well, I'll rent the house to you, conditioned on checking out your references. If everything checks out, and ask the question that I don't know if Lenny, somebody said, just ask them straight out. Just say, look, when I check your references, when I check your credit history, when I check your criminal history, am I going to find anything I don't like? They'll tell you. It's amazing what people will tell you. They will tell you right now, which short circuits the whole conversation if it's something you really don't like. If they're drug dealers, if they've got major problems, you might as well say, look, I don't think this is going to work out, and they'll leave. They'll leave. It's that simple. Take a cash deposit, a cashier's check, and I appreciate Jeff's comment about cashier's check. Be very careful about cashier's check. If you have a cashier's check on a local bank, you can probably call that bank and tell them you just accepted that cashier's check and you want to make sure it's good. That hopefully will short circuit the idea of them stopping payment. Give the tenants a key or a copy of the rental contract, the inspection sheet, only after you've got their money. Paragraph 12 is real important. Circle that if you're new in the business. Don't give somebody a rental contract or a key until you have their money. Cancel ads, remove sign, give them the inspection sheet, make sure you get it back. Note the deposit and rent amount and identify your deposit clearly so you do not accidentally include it in your rental income. And we'll talk about bookkeeping here in a second, but if you write down $1,200 rent, $2,400 deposit, and at the end of the year you just total that up, you might report the $2,400 deposit as rent. Well, that means you're paying taxes on money you did earn. That'd be a mistake, wouldn't it? So be careful you keep track of that separately. Note rental amount and due date on your property spreadsheet. I would assume that you'll come up with some simple system to keep track of your properties. If you only have one property, it's not very complicated to keep track of it. If you've got a couple dozen, it's a little different scale. But by using a spreadsheet like Excel right now, you can put all your information on there. And I do that. I keep everything on Excel. I have it on my phone. I have it on all my computers. It's real easy to access no matter where I am. But it's got all the tenants' names, all the addresses, all their phone numbers, how much rent they pay. We have all our rent due on one day of the month. And what day is that? It's the 1st. And there's a simple reason for that. What is it? It's easy to remember, isn't it? I mean, if you make your rents due on the 5th and on the 8th and on the 14th and have them all over the month, it's really hard for everybody to remember and it's hard for you to remember. So I'd rather prorate. So if somebody pays me on the 15th and they pay me, I don't ask them for a half a month's rent before they move in. What do I ask them for? Full month's rent plus the deposit. What I do then is I would prorate the next month's rent. So if they're paying me on June 15th, they'll pay me through July 15th. So on July 1st to 15th, they can pick a date in there someplace. They owe me a half a month's rent, and then they'll be paid up through the 1st of August. Okay? So everybody clear on that? Prorate the second month, not the first month. Yes, sir.
You talked about answering your cell phone during a vacancy. What about, how do you deal with nights and weekends?
Well, generally, I don't work nights and weekends. I mean, if you called me at 5:30 on an empty house, I'd probably answer the phone. But I do turn that phone off. I do not work nights and weekends. So Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, the phone would just ring. I would not answer it. It would have, I would collect their names and numbers, hopefully, and get back to them. But I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's me. I've always kind of taken a little pride that I can work banker's hours and make this work. Now, most people in the real estate business don't work banker's hours. Most people renting houses or selling houses would answer the phone at night. They would answer it on weekends. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do because it's business. If you don't mind working weekends, that's okay. Could rent your house faster. Because a lot of people probably do call on a Saturday or a Sunday. I understand that. It's just, it's just personal decision for me not to work those days. Next page, you'll see a notice of trespass. Guy stuck this on my car. I was parked someplace. It was on bright pink paper and it was kind of glued to my windshield. I liked it so much I put it in the book. I modified it a little bit. It's not exactly the same thing, but I guarantee you put that on bright pink paper and put it on somebody's windshield like a great big sticky note, they'll see it and they'll pay attention. And what this says is just because we haven't towed your car this time, we're being nice. It says if you park it here again, we're not going to give you any notice. We're just going to tow it. But it will get their attention. They probably won't park there again. Okay, maintaining your properties. Deferring maintenance costs you in 4 different ways. First, you might lose a good tenant. And what's a good tenant worth? A lot of money, worth thousands of dollars to you. So keep that in mind. If you're putting off fixing something little, a $200 item, and you lose a tenant that's been with you 4 or 5 years, that was a bad mistake. So you should have enough cash flow to keep your properties in decent shape. They don't have to be palaces. And I have noticed that some people over-improve their properties. And we don't have any granite countertops in any of our houses. All our houses have Formica in them, They're decent, they're clean, but they're not real fancy. They're not high-end houses. So don't over-improve your houses, but keep them in good shape. Keep them in good operating condition. A house in poor condition will take longer to re-rent. A house that's beat up, carpet's old and tired, the cabinets are old and tired. That's going to be a harder house to rent. The house is in pretty good shape. So occasionally you're going to have to redo those kitchens and redo those bathrooms and make it, spiff it up. But when you do, you don't have to spend $20,000 redoing the kitchen. You can probably do it for half that. And bathrooms probably do for a couple grand and make them look pretty good. But you need to occasionally update things. Some of you are probably like me. Anybody remember putting a new roof on about 10 years ago and it still seems new to you, or you put that new bathroom in? I was telling Valerie, we got a bunch of new houses. She said, well, all those new houses were built in 1978, so they're not quite new anymore, you know. But, you know, I still think of them as brand new houses because I remember when they were brand new. But then it's when I bought them, you know. So, you know, they look good then. They still look about the same to me. But you need to, and we're all bad at this, but you need to keep an eye on your houses and have some kind of budget and keep them in decent shape, because when you go to rent them, if they don't look decent, you're not going to be able to rent them at a good price. You'll bring down property values in the neighborhood if you really let your house run down. And it costs a lot more to make a major repair than to maintain a house. So if you keep your houses painted, you won't have to replace the wood trim. And if you keep the roofs in good shape, you won't have to replace all the fascia and soffit and all the wood that goes with it. So, you know, just have a budget, keep an eye on your houses, and don't have more than you can afford to maintain. You know, you may have 2 or 3 too many houses. You'll need to get rid of them to have the cash to do a good job on the rest of them. A major repair must be made by higher skilled price labor, so you know you're going to end up paying more to do a lot of carpentry work than you would if you just painted the house to start with. And of course, you may need a permit to do a major job. And when you get a new permit, they may require you to do different stuff, right? You get somebody come out and inspect your work, they may require you to do a whole bunch of things. So avoid that if you can. Remodeling with a tenant in place. I call this my Tilney plan. How many people know David Tilney or taken his class? A good friend of mine, student of ours, I've known him for years. I spent some time with David out in his house 2 years ago. And we drove around looking at a bunch of his houses, and a couple houses he showed me were being remodeled, and the tenants were still living there. I said, I like this plan. I like this plan. So right now we're putting a new bathtub and shower and sink and all new floor tile and redoing a bath in a house that's occupied by a tenant. Okay? Well, you're doing 2 at the same time? Yeah, they have 2 baths, so they can use the other one. It's a 2-bathroom house, so that's an important point. But you know, it's an inconvenience, I'm sure, because it'll all be torn up for a week or so. But they're living through it, and they're thrilled to be getting a whole new bathroom, all new tile, all new appliances. That's a smart thing to do, isn't it? You don't lose a day's rent. You got a tenant there the whole time. So I thank you to Mr. Tilney and encourage you all to go to his course. He's full of little information like that. On the next page, you'll see a tenant call log, and the following page, you'll see a property maintenance log. These are just copies of actual sheets I keep by the phone in my office. And I keep track. I like to have this visualization. You know, I like to have a running account of people I talk to, when I talk to them. As I tell you, it helps me judge our system. You know, if I'm getting 10 calls a week, something's wrong. You know, I shouldn't be getting 10 calls a week. And as I pointed out, I think I've had 10 or 11 calls here the first 5 months of the year. Very small number of calls. Some of that may be seasonal. You know, you probably get more calls during the summertime. Rains more, air conditioners break more. Maybe more of a seasonal thing. But you keep track of them. And the maintenance log, the next page, has saved me a lot of money because, again, you get callbacks for the same issues sometimes. AC issues, plumbing issues, electrical issues. We've got a sink drain that's been leaking. This is the second time the same guy has replaced the same sink drain. Well, he's got to get paid the second time. I mean, he should have fixed that the first time. So, see, these little things, they don't seem like much, but they can save you some serious money over the long run. And when you're talking to tenants, it's good to have the history of what you've done to their property, because when you go to renew somebody's agreement, you know, a year goes by and you're deciding how much to raise their rent. If they've had a lot of maintenance issues that year, but there's a sign that they're not very, you know, they're pretty rough on that house. You know, if they've had 4 or 5 maintenance calls in a year, that's higher than normal, and you might want to raise their rent a little extra or just not renew them at all. Next page, you'll see what our mission statement says. It said our mission is to make a profit renting decent housing at fair prices.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
We have a property inspection sheet.
Okay, so we skipped one. Oh, I skipped one. I skipped right over that. Never mind. I did. I skipped a couple pages of my book.
Advanced.
Yeah, we're moving faster than you are. So the property inspection sheet, I talked to you about this when we talked about the rental contract. I give people this sheet, and you probably have one that might even look better than that. But the idea is to give them an inspection page that they can fill out and give back to you. And you want them to give it back to you in a short period of time. I say 3 days. So give it back to me within 3 days of taking occupancy. And if there's something wrong with the house, I want to fix it. But if you don't send it back, and after 3 days, after we fix everything that's wrong with the house, when something breaks, and something will break down the road probably, it's your responsibility. So make sure if you're going to use this system, it works well. If you're going to use it, just use all of it. You know, don't use pieces of it because it all kind of fits together. Now we can go to the next page, right? And the next page says, being a landlord without having an office. Did I get that one right? Good. You know, we still have an office, and I've condoed my office out. I've kind of gone full cycle. When I first started in this business, I had an office, and I brought in 2 other guys, and there were 3 people in this office, and we split the overhead, the rent 3 ways. We split the copy machine and the phone system and the secretary, split everything up 3 ways, because I was poor, I was young, and you know, the other guys were too. It was a great way to run an office. So we each had a little piece of an office, and it worked. It was a real office. Eventually, both those guys moved on, and I kept everything full-time for myself, hired a couple other people because we got bigger. But now we've kind of peaked out. We're going down the other side of this hill. We have fewer employees, don't have any employees at this point, and probably won't hire anybody else. I can't imagine hiring anybody else right now. And now I've just sublet half of my office space to somebody else who's already in our building, so he'll fit in there nicely. He's another real estate investor. So we're getting our overhead down. There's an advantage to having an office. And our office overhead will be $500 a month. That includes electricity. So that's a reasonable amount for a guy who's in business, and I'm still in business. And so you can rent an office for a fairly inexpensive amount of money if you want to. You know, if you want to condo it out and have a small office someplace. And the advantages are you don't have to meet people someplace else. You know, you never want to meet people at the house you live in, do you? You don't want tenants coming over to your house. That's a bad plan because you never know when you're going to get a nutcase, you know, and you don't want the nutcase to come see you at your home. So you want to meet someplace else at their house. Now, if you don't have an office, you can meet other places. And I've listed a couple other thoughts here. I mean, most of you have bank accounts. You could meet in a bank lobby. Most of them have a place you can meet there, or a title company. My friend Jack Miller used to meet people at the post office. He said that had a lot of benefits. You know, you can put things right in the mailbox. Nobody can mug you on the way out and all that. You know, if you got any buddies that are in a real estate business or you know, have any kind of office, title company office, all those places work, and they're good places to meet. You know, how many meetings are you going to have a month or a year? And if you only have a half a dozen houses or 2 or 3 houses, you may only have 1 meeting a year or 2 meetings a year. You know, and for that, you don't really need a full-time office. So if you don't have a lot of property and you don't need a full-time office, think through some of these ideas and see where you can meet people and operate. But you want to look as professional as possible. This buys you something. Looking like you know what you're doing buys you something. So you want to look like a professional landlord, even if this is the first time you've ever rented a house. So if you can meet in a bank conference room or a title company conference room, that makes you look more professional, doesn't it? Because it's a real office. You know, they have copy machines and paper clips and all the stuff you need there. Second thing you can do is hold an open house at your house for rent. We talked about that earlier, but that's very effective. And especially if you get a number of people there, if you're going to do that, be prepared to do some business. Have your applications there, have a receipt book there, have your rental contracts there. You know, you can go through, you could take somebody's application and go through the rental contract and rent it to them conditioned upon you checking out their application. So you can do a lot of business at an open house. Give them a list of repair people for emergencies. You're going to see our emergency contact list in just a second. But I give people a list of our best people for emergencies. You know, I don't go to the folks I've never heard of before. I use our best plumber, our best electrician, because if there's a true emergency, I want my best man on the job. You know, I want the best person doing the repairs. And they may be a little more expensive, but in the long run, the guy who really knows what he's doing is going to do it cheaper than somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. So you want the best person you know. Give them an email address for maintenance requests and other communications. And you know, you don't have to use email, but it's the most effective way I found. How are other people communicating with your tenants other than email, cell phones, texting, any other method you're using? Smoke signals? Shotgun. Okay. An option, you give them your cell phone number. And you know, the nice thing about cell phones is you don't have to answer them. You can let them ring, you can let them, you go let them record the message, and you listen to it, you think about what kind of response you want to make, and then you call them back, right? It gives you a minute or two to think. And as I said earlier, you know, if there is maintenance required, if somebody calls me and says my air conditioner is leaking, it's not cooling, I'm going to call my AC guy before I even call him back and find out what his schedule is and when he can go over there. So when I call him back, I can say, look, I'll have the guy out there as fast as we can. I think he can be out there by 5 o'clock this afternoon. You're responsible for the first $100. I'll pay the rest of it, but he's on his way. We should have you back in business by tonight. And that makes them happy. You know, the money's is an irritation, but they will pay $100 to have the AC working by 5 o'clock and be happier doing that than let it drag out for 2 or 3 days. Then they're going to get grumpy, aren't they? So I think by being able to respond quickly and by responding fairly quickly to these issues that will come up, you'll keep your people happier. Yes, ma'am.
So my tenant pays my AC guy $100 when
No,
he comes?
no, he pays you the $100. You pay the AC guy. Yeah.
Pay the
Yeah,
AC.
and you're gonna see the letter here in a second, but when I have an AC guy or anybody go out to a house to do work, I follow that call up with a letter the next day and say, you called, we sent the guy out, he did the repair, we're just following up to make sure he did the repair well. And if he didn't do the repair to your satisfaction, you let me know right now, I'm gonna send him back out there. And I wanna keep my AC guy, or whoever went out there, I wanna make sure they're doing a good job too, right? But then it says in that letter, because we sent him out, next month you have to pay the extra $100. Now, if you're not doing much volume, if you only have one house, link up with find some other people in your town who are in the same business, who have other investment properties, and find out who they're doing business with. And 2 or 3 of you people, use the same AC guy, and then you can say, hey, Randy told me to call you. You do all of Randy's work, and I hear you do a good job for him. I'd like you to do my work too. Now you got a little leverage, don't you?